I hadn't planned on going upstairs. The dress rehearsal was over. Guests were trickling in. The string quartet was tuning under the archway. I'd paid $3,000 to have decorated with white roses and eucalyptus. Even though I didn't know eucalyptus had a scent until the florist told me. Everything was in place. Everyone was exactly where they should be. Except her. I was supposed to be in the groom's lounge, sipping something brown and convincing myself that all the nerves were just adrenaline. Instead, I was walking past the elevators of the boutique hotel attached to our venue, holding my phone like it was a detonator. The text was still on the screen. Room 914. No name, no explanation, just a location and a silent promise that once I stepped into that hallway, things would not be the same. My best friend had disappeared an hour earlier. Said he had a headache. Said he needed a nap before the chaos. I didn't think anything of it. Not then. We'd been friends for years. Grown men who'd been boys together, fought over dumb things, covered for each other, stood up at funerals and engagements and hospital rooms. He helped me pick the ring. He helped me rehearse the proposal speech. He was the first one I told when I decided she was the one. The elevator pinged, and the hallway was deserted, like time had politely stepped aside to give me space. Room 914 wasn't far. I knocked once, not because I expected an answer. I just needed a second more before the moment cracked. When the door swung open, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Not at first. My brain stalled like it had skipped a frame in the film. She was laughing. Her dress, not the dress, but a silk robe, was halfway off her shoulder. My best friend was shirtless, leaning back like this was a vacation. The other man had his back to me, his voice muffled in the curve of her neck. Then she looked at me, directly, like I was interrupting her meal, like I had no business being there. She blinked, adjusted her robe with agonizing calm, and said it. "You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony." Her voice had that mocking tilt, the one she used when I spilled wine on her white couch last winter, and she called it predictable. My best friend didn't even pretend to be ashamed. He grinned. The third guy turned and I realized he was wearing the cufflinks I bought for her father. I didn't say anything. Not then. I remember the weight of the ring in my pocket, a symbol of promises I thought we both believed in. I remember how the room smelled like expensive perfume and something else, something bitter and wrong. I walked in, took 2 steps toward her, and she flinched, not from fear, but from disgust, like my presence had broken some invisible rule. She whispered something to the other man. My best friend chuckled. And that was it. I reached into my pocket, pulled the ring free, and placed it on the nightstand beside a half-drunk glass of champagne and a lipstick-smudged napkin. I left without looking back. No scene, no shouting, no punches, just a door closing behind me and the sound of something ancient inside me splitting down the middle. The world didn't end, but something did, and whatever came next wouldn't be gentle. The walk back through the hotel felt unreal, like stepping onto a stage mid-play with no lines and the lights too bright. People smiled at me in passing. Vendors, early guests, some cousin whose name I couldn't recall. All of them smiling, congratulating me. Completely unaware that the man they were patting on the back had just seen his fiancée tangled up in a scene that didn't belong in any version of our story. I kept walking, nodding when I had to, my legs operating on a kind of emergency autopilot, like the body knew it had to keep moving before the soul caught up and collapsed. When I reached the courtyard, I saw the coordinator gesturing about flower placements, her headset slipping off her ear. The musicians were warming up. My mother was sitting in the front row, dabbing at her eyes, not because she was crying, but because she'd started tearing up early and didn't want to look blotchy in the photos. I stood there, in full tux, watching the event roll forward like a slow, merciless machine. The only thing missing was the bride. I walked straight to my car. No goodbye, no announcements, just me and the echo of that scene upstairs playing on a loop. The parking lot was nearly empty, my black sedan sitting quietly like it had been waiting for me to flee all along. I slid inside and sat there, keys untouched, staring at the steering wheel, not gripping it, not shaking, just sitting. The engine didn't roar to life. The radio didn't click on. I didn't even cry. I just sat in silence, listening to the ringing in my ears, and felt the shift, the realization that a part of me had been severed neatly and cleanly, like a limb you don't know is gone until you try to move it. I didn't drive away immediately. I turned my phone over in my hand, debating whether to delete the message. Instead, I scrolled up. No name, no thread history, just a number and the room number. Someone had wanted me to see that. Someone had known. And that made it worse, knowing there was a circle of people, maybe small, maybe not, who had been in on it. Who'd watched my back bend under the weight of vows that only I was carrying. I texted one word back. Why? No answer. Just the quiet hum of the car's idle systems. Minutes passed. Then the passenger door opened. My best friend slid into the seat beside me like this was the most normal thing in the world. Still shirtless under a blazer. Eyes a little glassy, but smiling. I looked at him, stunned, waiting for anything. An apology, an explanation, a sign that he understood what he'd done. But he just sat there, slouched, casual, as if we were about to hit a bar, not ground zero of my life. You weren't supposed to see that, he said, almost amused. But I guess it's better this way. Saves everyone the drama. I didn't reply. I think I was still processing the fact that he'd come to me, as if I owed him closure, as if he were doing me a favor. She was never going to be what you wanted, he continued. You thought you had something real, but you didn't see it. Not really. She gets bored, man. Always has. You were just next. I turned toward him slowly. Then why let me go through with it at all? He shrugged. Didn't think you'd actually need to. Thought maybe she'd come clean. Or maybe you'd figure it out. But I guess not. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not rage, not grief, but a kind of surgical clarity. The kind that burns away all excuses, all history, all the soft lies people tell themselves to keep their world spinning. I didn't yell. I didn't lunge. I just leaned back, exhaled once and said, "Get out of the car." He blinked. What? Get out. He stared for a second, like he didn't quite believe I meant it. But I did. And after a moment, he opened the door, stepped out, and walked away without another word. I watched him go, then finally started the engine. No destination in mind. Just away. Away from the flowers. Away from the music. Away from the betrayal still settling into the lining of my skin like smoke in fabric. I didn't know where I was headed, only that I couldn't stay where I was. And for the first time that day I felt something like peace. Not happiness. Not relief. But the strange peace that comes when everything breaks. Because once it does, there's nothing left to pretend that I drove without a map. No music, no plan. Just the low murmur of tires on asphalt and the unsettling clarity that comes when your life abruptly rearranges itself into something unrecognizable. I passed places we used to go. A cafe where she once cried about a broken heel. The bookstore where she pretended to like history because I was browsing biographies. I kept driving, windows down, letting the air scrub at my skin like I could shake off the memory of her voice in that room, feigning indignation like I was the one who'd ruined the moment. By the time I stopped, the sun was slipping behind a strip mall and painting the sky in orange surrender. I found myself in front of a diner, fluorescent lights buzzing, an old neon sign barely clinging to life. It was the kind of place you end up when the road has no answers. I stepped inside, found a booth in the corner, and ordered coffee I didn't want. The waitress didn't ask questions. She slid the cup toward me like she'd done it 1,000 times for men in suits with haunted eyes. And then my phone buzzed. It wasn't her. It wasn't him. It was a name I hadn't expected, her sister. The message was simple. 2 words. She told. I stared at the screen, unsure what I was supposed to do with that. Was it an apology? A warning? A confession? I typed back a question and deleted it before sending. What was I supposed to ask? Why did you let it happen? When did you know? Did you laugh about it together? None of it mattered. Not now. Another message came. This time longer. She said you'd forgive her. She thinks you're too afraid to be alone. That one hit like a quiet explosion. I read it 3 times, each word searing deeper. That wasn't just betrayal. That was a calculated bet against my spine, against my dignity. She hadn't just cheated. She'd banked on me being too weak to walk, too desperate to hold on to her. She thought I'd eat the lie, wash it down with champagne, and stand under that arch anyway, smiling for the cameras while they all smirked behind their flutes. And the worst part? She wasn't wrong. Not completely. I had wanted it so badly to work. I'd ignored the off notes, laughed off the absences, defended her distance. I'd bent myself in ways I didn't even notice, and all the while, she'd been placing bets against me like I was just another round in a game she played for entertainment. My fingers shook as I typed, not out of rage but the sheer violence of restraint. Tell her I wasn't afraid to be alone. I was afraid she'd already left me, and I was right. I hit send. No response. But I didn't need one. I paid for the untouched coffee and stepped outside into the thick evening air. I didn't have a home anymore, not the kind you build with another person. My apartment still had her scent in the pillows, her earrings in the drawers, her name on the lease. But none of it felt like mine. Not anymore. I drove to my brother's place. He opened the door shirtless and confused, halfway through grilling something on his tiny balcony. I said 3 words, "I need a week." He didn't ask, just nodded, stepped aside, and let me in. That night, lying on a couch too short for sleep and too rough for comfort, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how betrayal doesn't just take your future. It steals your past. All our moments were poisoned now. Every laugh, every kiss, every "I love you" replayed in my head like a lie told in perfect pitch. And yet, beneath the wreckage, a new feeling stirred. Not hope, not yet, but something sharper. Resolve. The next morning hit hard. Not in the melodramatic sense. No violent awakenings. No dreams shattered by daylight. Just that awful wait when your eyes open and, for a second, your brain hasn't caught up yet. And then it does. And it's all still there. I lay still on my brother's couch, surrounded by the faint smell of takeout and gym socks, staring at the cracked ceiling like it could answer the question echoing inside my chest. What now? I didn't move for an hour. Not until my phone lit up again. Unknown number. I knew it was her before I even opened it. Her tone was unmistakable. Not pleading, not apologizing. Calm. Controlled. As if she were managing a client relationship. "We should talk. You left a mess." A mess. That's what she called it. Not what happened, not what I did, but the fact that I'd had the audacity to walk out. To not play the part. To leave before the curtain call. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence would speak for me. Louder, cleaner, sharper than anything I could say. But 10 minutes later, another message came. "If you're going to throw everything away over one mistake, maybe we weren't right anyway." One mistake. That was the line she chose to die on. I wanted to throw the phone. Wanted to scream. But I didn't. I set it down gently, like it was made of glass and guilt, and I wasn't ready to break either just yet. Then I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water like I was trying to remind myself how to be human. My brother walked in, saw my face, and nodded once. He didn't ask. He didn't offer advice. Just sat across from me at the cluttered table, chewing toast like it was the only thing holding the universe together. "I'm going back," I said eventually. "To the apartment." He raised an eyebrow. "Just to get my stuff," I added. He didn't argue, just passed me his keys in silence. The drive back was quieter than it had any right to be. The city moved like it always had, indifferent, mechanical, unbothered by the fact that my world had buckled. When I pulled into the lot, I half expected her to be gone. But no, her car was there, parked like nothing had changed. I walked up, keys ready, and unlocked the door. She was inside, not crying, not apologizing. She was on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling through her phone like she was waiting for a delivery. When she looked up, her expression wasn't guilt. It was irritation. "You didn't answer me," she said. I closed the door behind me, dropped my keys on the counter. "No," I replied. "I didn't." She stood, slowly, arms crossed, defensive already, as if I were the one who needed to justify my presence. "You really just left?" she asked. No explanation, no conversation. "You just vanished." I stepped forward, not threatening, just done. "There's nothing to explain," I said. "I saw everything I needed to." "That's not fair." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the sheer absurdity of that statement twisted something in me. "Not fair," I repeated. "You were in bed with 2 people, and you think I was unfair?" Her jaw tensed. "It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. One night." "No," I said, voice flat, steady. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something you didn't mean. What you did takes coordination. Planning. Will. She shook her head. You're being dramatic. And just like that, I realized there was nothing left to salvage. Not even hatred. Just ash. I walked past her, opened the closet, and started pulling out my things. She didn't stop me. Just stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed in a line so tight it could cut glass. Where are you going to go? She asked, almost casually. Anywhere but here. I packed in silence. A bag. A box. A drawer's worth of shirts that smelled like her perfume. I left those. As I zipped up the last of it, she spoke again. Softer this time, almost wistful. You'll regret this. Eventually, you will. And I won't be here when you do. I stopped, looked at her. I already regret something, I said. But it's not leaving. And with that, I walked out. She didn't follow. It rained that night. The kind of rain that doesn't fall, it presses. Heavy. Relentless. Like the sky itself wants to drown out whatever you're running from. I stood under the awning outside my brother's place, my duffel bag at my feet, letting the water soak through my sleeves before I went inside. I didn't want to carry her scent in with me. The apartment had always smelled like her. Vanilla, maybe jasmine, something expensive I was never meant to understand. I left those clothes in the trunk. Inside, my brother was asleep on the couch with the TV still flickering. A documentary about sharks. Probably the closest thing to comfort in a house like his. Simple, direct, no frills. I dropped the bag in the corner, sat at the table, and stared at nothing for a long time. There was no wedding to cancel. I'd disappeared before it could start. But the aftermath had begun unraveling on its own. My phone lit up with messages. My mother, her father, friends caught in the crossfire. Some wanted answers. Some wanted sides. A few had already picked theirs. None of it mattered. What mattered was the silence. She didn't text again. That was louder than anything. The next day, I started the process. Calls to the caterer, the photographer, the venue coordinator. Everyone was polite, professional. A few were sympathetic. One woman, the baker, actually cried. Said she'd never seen a groom pull out before the ceremony. Not like that. I didn't tell her why. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. But the story was spreading anyway. By evening, I got a call from a mutual friend. I picked up on instinct, forgetting how deep people can cut when they think they're helping. She said you just bailed. He started. No explanation. Cold feet. Everyone's saying you had a breakdown or something. I laughed, bitter and dry. A breakdown. That's what she's telling people, he said. That you vanished. That you couldn't handle it. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Then he added, Look, man, I gotta ask. Caleb's saying you knew about them for months and were trying to outplay them somehow. Like this was your way of getting even. That stopped me. What? Yeah, he's bragging now. Says you're too proud to admit you got played, so you're flipping the narrative. Making yourself the martyr. I gripped the phone tighter. Not out of anger, but because I felt something snapping inside me that wasn't rage. It was the erosion of disbelief. The realization that people I'd let into my most sacred moments were casually rewriting my story while I was still bleeding from it. Thanks for telling me, I said, and hung up. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark with a notebook, something I hadn't touched in years. I used to write when I was younger, short stories, ideas, scraps of thought. That night I wrote the truth. Every detail, every memory, not for revenge, not to share, just to remember it all before time and shame tried to dilute it. And as I wrote, a thought crystallized. They weren't sorry. Not her. Not him. Not even the circle that watched it all happen. They'd built a fortress of lies and adorned it with my silence, betting I wouldn't burn it down. But silence is a temporary weapon. Truth waits, and it was starting to sharpen. By the third day, I stopped answering the phone altogether. I turned off notifications, blocked half a dozen numbers. Even the messages that came from a place of concern began to sound rehearsed, like people were just trying to cover their tracks before choosing sides. My brother had started giving me space, quietly leaving food by the door, taking calls in the hallway, pretending not to hear me pacing at 3 a.m. I appreciated it. There was something merciful in his silence. He wasn't trying to fix me. He wasn't asking what I was going to do. He just let the space exist around me, thick and messy and raw. That day, something shifted. I'd gone out to clear my head, just a walk, no destination, and found myself in front of a bar we used to visit on Fridays. I almost kept walking, almost, but then I saw her car, parked crooked, half over the line like she always did when she was trying to be effortless. And then I saw him, not Caleb, the other guy, the stranger. He was leaning against the side of the car, phone in hand, laughing at something. Not a care in the world. I stood there for a minute, deciding. I could have walked away, should have, but something inside me had begun to rot. A kind of infection that grows when betrayal festers unchecked. I walked over, calmly, deliberately, stopping just a few feet from him. He looked up and recognized me instantly. His smile dropped. He didn't speak. "Do you even know who I am?" I asked. He hesitated. Then, "You're the guy who left the wedding." "That's one way to put it," I said. There was a beat of silence. He tried to gather himself. "Look, man, I didn't know she was engaged. She said you two were on a break. Said you were toxic." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Toxic? That's what she told you?" He shrugged. "It wasn't serious. For her, anyway. You should probably take it up with her." "I did," I said. "But she thinks I'll come back. Thinks I'll miss her enough to pretend this didn't happen." He scoffed. "She's got confidence. I'll give her that." And there it was, the casual dismissal. The tone that made it clear I'd never been seen as a person in this equation. Just a placeholder, an obstacle, a name on an invitation that had outlived its usefulness. I took one step closer. Not threatening, just enough. "Next time someone tells you they're on a break," I said quietly, "make sure you're not the side piece in someone else's horror story." He didn't reply. Didn't need to. I turned and walked away, leaving the moment behind like a burnt match. Later that night, back at my brother's place, I opened my inbox and saw the message I didn't expect. It was from her. A video. No subject. No text. Curiosity overpowered common sense. I clicked. It wasn't what I thought. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a plea. It was a recording taken days before the wedding. She was at dinner, with friends, laughing. Someone off camera asked, "You nervous?" She rolled her eyes. "About what?" "He's obsessed with me. He'd marry me if I ghosted him for a week." They laughed. She took a sip of wine and added, "I could sleep with his best friend and he'd still show up. He needs me." The camera wobbled as someone said, "That's dark," and she smiled. The video ended. I sat there, not shocked, not anymore, but hollowed out. She didn't send it to confess. She sent it to remind me of who she thought I was, of what she believed I would tolerate. It was her way of proving she'd won, that I would always orbit her, no matter how far I drifted. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood, walked into the kitchen, and deleted every photo of her from my phone. Then I opened the notes I'd been writing, the journal of it all, and started a new page. "This is the end of the story," she wrote. "Now I write mine." The following week moved like molasses through a cracked hourglass. Time didn't pass so much as seep, leaking through the holes she'd left behind. I kept to myself, barely speaking, going through routines with the emotional depth of a statue. But somewhere under the weight of all that silence, I felt something start to breathe. It wasn't healing. It wasn't strength. It was vengeance. Not the kind with screaming or fists, but the cold, surgical kind that stares back at the people who tried to dismantle you and makes them watch while you rebuild with sharper edges. On day 6, I went to the venue. Not to rage. Not to demand a refund. I just needed to see the aftermath. The damage. The place was quiet now. Empty chairs. Wilting flowers. A crew slowly disassembling the dreams I'd once scripted onto that property like a ceremony could sanctify the rotten beneath. I stood at the edge of the aisle and imagined what she'd have looked like walking toward me. Not the version that existed now, but the one I'd made up. The fiction. The woman I believed in more than I believed in myself. The event manager spotted me. She approached gently, like I was a stray animal she didn't want to spook. "We boxed up everything," she said. "Left it by the office. No one's claimed it yet." "Keep it," I said. She looked surprised. "There's a lot of personal items." "I know." I turned to leave, but she stepped forward. Can I ask something? I paused. Why didn't you go through with it? I looked at her. She wasn't asking for gossip. She genuinely wanted to understand. I thought for a long moment, then said, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't staying. It's leaving when you know they never loved you the way you loved them. She didn't reply, just nodded and let me go. That night, I sat with my brother and finally told him everything. From the text to the hotel room to the video. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just told it like facts. Data. A report from the wreckage. When I finished, he leaned back, arms crossed. You want to ruin them? No, I said. I want them to ruin themselves, while I rise from it. He cracked a smile. So what's the plan? And that was when the idea came. Not revenge. Truth. She wanted control of the narrative. She wanted to be the wounded bride, abandoned at the altar. She wanted whispers of poor girl, of he couldn't handle commitment. She was already sculpting the story with her friends, her family, her curated grief. But I had something she didn't. The full story, and the courage to let it breathe. So I started writing, not as a victim, not as a man scorned, but as a witness, to the performance, to the manipulation, to the moment I stopped pretending I was the problem. I didn't post it, not yet. I saved it, drafted, sharpened, let the words take shape like a blade. Because truth, once revealed, doesn't need rage. It just needs timing. And the clock had just begun ticking. The first person I sent the truth to wasn't her. It was her father. Took me 3 days to write the message. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what I wanted to say and had to carve it down to what I needed to say. Her father had always liked me, or pretended to. Hard to say now. He was a man of precision. Tight suits, tighter opinions, the kind who measured worth in posture and eye contact. He'd shaken my hand once and said, "If you hurt my daughter, I'll bury you with that ring." So I figured it was time we talked about what she'd done with it. I didn't send a long message. No essay. No sob story. Just the facts. You might want to ask your daughter what really happened. There's a video. I've attached it. You're not hearing the whole story. That was it. No response. Not for 2 days. Then a call. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was different. Quiet. Shaken but trying not to be. "Thank you for telling me. I'm sorry you found out the way you did. She's not who we thought. I wish you peace." That was it. No questions. No defense. Just that. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like turning the final key in a lock you never wanted to touch. By then, people had started whispering. Not in public. Not online. But behind the curtains, through quiet channels. Friends who hadn't picked sides started reaching out. A few apologized for assuming. One told me they'd overheard her at a party, laughing about the wedding collapse, like it was a drama she'd written for clout. "She said you were broken," they told me. I thanked them. Then I published the story. Not names. Not specifics. Just the experience. Raw, stripped of decor, laid bare for anyone who had ever doubted the voice in their chest when something felt off but they stayed anyway. I posted it under a different name. An anonymous medium. Just a man, recounting what it felt like to be turned into a placeholder in his own life. It went viral in less than 24 hours. The comments flooded in. Thousands. Some shared similar stories. Some cried. Some raged. But most said the same thing. "You wrote the thing I was too afraid to say." It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. And then came the ripple. She messaged me. Was that about me? No greeting. No remorse. Just control slipping. I didn't reply. She tried again 2 hours later. "You made me look like a monster." Another hour passed. "You always had a flair for drama. This proves it." Then silence. Until the next day. A final message. "Congratulations. You finally got the attention you needed." I stared at that one for a long time. Then I deleted it and blocked her. Not out of spite. Not out of weakness. But because something inside me had finally shifted. I no longer needed her to understand. I no longer needed her to know. Because the story wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. And the man I became the moment I chose truth over illusion. A week passed. Then another. The buzz from the story eventually quieted, as all things viral do. but something lingered beneath the surface. Not the attention, not the sympathy, the clarity, the stillness of standing in the ruins and finally recognizing which pieces were worth salvaging. For the first time in years, I started waking up without a heaviness on my chest. I began running again, not to escape, but to feel the rhythm of my own breath, to remember what it meant to move for myself. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in months. People she quietly peeled away from me over time, under the guise of, they don't understand us. Turned out they did. One night, I met up with 2 of them at a local bar. Not our usual place, a new one. Clean. Honest. No shared ghosts in the corners. They didn't ask questions right away. Just let the conversation flow. But eventually, one of them leaned forward and asked gently, "If you had the chance, would you undo it? Go back before all of it happened?" I didn't answer immediately. I thought about that morning, about the hotel room, about her voice saying, "You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony." Like I had broken some sacred pact by walking in on her desecrating hours. I sipped my drink, then said, "No, I still want to see it. All of it. I needed to." They nodded, both understanding more than words could say. The next morning I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. The handwriting was hers. It was brief, strange, disconnected from reality. "I heard what you wrote. People talk. You made yourself into the hero. Maybe that's what you needed. Maybe we were both lying. But at least I never claimed to be perfect. You did. I hope your version of the truth keeps you warm at night. I'm done explaining myself." That was it. No apology. No regret. Just a final attempt to reclaim the stage. But the stage was empty now. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel pity. I felt nothing. Because that's what happens when you finally let go. The rope doesn't burn your hands anymore. You just drop it and walk. In the weeks that followed, I moved. Found a new apartment. Nothing special. No skyline view. No carefully curated decorations to match her aesthetic. Just mine. A place that didn't smell like someone else's preferences. A space where my thoughts could echo without bumping into her expectations. And slowly I began to rebuild. Not a revenge arc. A reclamation. A voice. Of worth. Of myself. Because that's the part of betrayal no one talks about. The slow, deliberate excavation of everything that was buried beneath the illusion. It's not about forgetting them. It's about remembering you. The final part of this story didn't come with a crescendo or some cinematic reckoning. No storms. No knock on the door. Just a quiet evening, 3 months later, as autumn had begun carving the city into something colder, cleaner. I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment. The air had that sharp bite of the season shifting. Leaves rustling like whispers that didn't need to be heard to be understood. My phone was face down. My thoughts weren't spinning. I realized then that peace doesn't announce itself. It arrives unnoticed and settles like dust. I hadn't heard from her since the letter. The world had moved on. Friends had stopped asking questions. The online buzz had faded. I deleted the story from the anonymous account weeks ago. Not because I was ashamed of it. Because I no longer needed it to exist outside of me. It had served its purpose. Like fire to a field, it burned what needed to be cleared. I started seeing things clearly again. The way people looked me in the eye, the tone of their voices, the pause before they responded. I saw kindness more sharply now. Not just in others, but in myself. In the fact that I hadn't let this experience twist me into someone cruel. I tried, but I refused. One evening, I ran into Caleb. It was bound to happen. The city wasn't endless, and patterns always loop. He saw me first, hesitated. We were outside a bookstore. I just picked up a novel I used to love. He was coming out of a cafe with someone I didn't recognize. We locked eyes, and for the first time I wasn't angry. I wasn't even curious. I was indifferent, and that scared him more than anything. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but I gave him a nod, polite, final, and kept walking. He didn't follow. That night, I wrote a final note in the same notebook that had become my therapist, my witness, my mirror. You survived the kind of betrayal that tears the lungs out of a man. And you didn't just survive, you stood back up. Not because you were unbroken, but because you rebuilt yourself from the wreckage. Stronger, quieter, smarter. The lesson wasn't to never trust again. The The lesson was to never ignore your own silence when it starts screaming. Listen better. Love smarter. And next time, if there is a next time, bring all of yourself. But never again to someone who treats your soul like it's a stage for their drama. And I closed the book. That was the end of her story in me. And the beginning of mine.